Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Tucker Hazel, and we're here to chat about actually, Tucker, quite a few games. Now, this is of
Yeah, I
course
know.
our weekly show where we regale each other with tales about the games we've been playing over the past week.
hmm
And if you remember pretty recently, we did an episode about our gaming New Year's resolutions. And Tucker, one of my resolutions was to actually finish more games, opposed to just play
Yes.
a lot of games. And Tucker, last week, I have both played and finished a lot of games, and I'd like to
Yes,
tell
I
you about
know.
them.
And I'd like to, Your Honor, I'd like to pull evidence, example A, in which my quote about the games that you've played this week is simultaneously terrifying and arousing.
To which I
And
responded,
the fact that I'm playing this game in question will prove to be very arousing. And I'd like to say, just put that out there as the thesis of this entire episode, because I am simultaneously very excited by the fact that you are completing so many games, but it is mentally taxing for me. I have to let you know, because I pride myself in keeping up with what games you're playing and what your opinions are there. And when I wake up in it, like, and I look on Discord and you're like, oh, I'm almost done with the game that I didn't even know you had started. That fucks with me. It fucks with my internal monologue, dialogue, all those things. But at the same time, I'm like, oh shit, he's getting into the swing of things, and it's kind of exciting.
now, if it makes you feel better, I pay very little attention to what you play.
Yeah,
Now, now, Tucker, would you like to start with the game that's going to arouse you?
yeah. Let's get out of there. Let's
I mean,
get out of
I
the way.
don't want to blue ball you for the next 45 minutes or so,
It's
right?
true. Yeah, I only found out about it 30 minutes ago, so I haven't been blue balled for very long.
Right, and I finished playing it for my first session about 30 minutes ago. I want to take you on a walk for this one.
Oh God.
I
Oh
like to
fuck.
take you on a walk. Super Mario Odyssey is an excellent game,
hmm
and one of the reasons Super Mario Odyssey is excellent is because Mario controls so well that just being in a kingdom is fun.
Yeah.
Playing with Cappy, learning the movement, getting into the rhythm of things, that's really fun.
hmm
And I'm someone who really loves game feel. If a game feels good to play, I'm automatically going to be more connected to it.
Sure.
There's just certain mechanics, there's certain movement systems that feel so satisfying,
hmm
and that's something that immediately attracts me to a game. I also love a great aesthetic.
hmm
I love a world, and playing this game in question, I had great movement and I had great aesthetic, and I found myself um becoming really tired, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And I looked at my phone, and I had lost track of an entire hour
hmm
because I was immersed in this game. Before I
Sure.
reveal its identity, Tucker.
But also, I would like to note that it is past midnight for you, which is
Correct.
why we're recording this episode late, because he's very excited about this game in question that we're talking about. Which is why he was tired. It's not the fact that you I don't know, this game was probably not super mentally taxing, but it was late, and
Yes.
time was flying by.
You're not right about a lot of things. And when you are right, I like to not give you credit as to not inflate your ego.
Yes.
Right? This is just an objective fact.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
And we've mentioned that a few times before. Yeah.
But sometimes, Tucker, you get something right, and
Oh God.
I gotta
Oh
call a
fuck.
ball and a strike. Tucker, I have started playing Ori and the Blind Forest,
Oh,
and
that
it's a
is
lovely video game.
that is arousing.
It's a lovely video game.
Oh shit.
So I have,
Now I'm not gonna lie.
yes,
I thought it was gonna be Banjo, um, which
sure,
you had already played Banjo. We've I don't know if we talked about your thoughts on it, except for the fact that your Xbox got fucked possibly because of it.
yes,
But honestly, the fact that it's Ori is even better.
yes. So I started Ori. Um, it's really great. It's really great. Like I said, as I alluded to as I was winding you up, uh, the movement is excellent, and I think that's what's sticking out to me the most so far because
hmm
a lot of it, to be fair, is pretty archetypical Metroidvania.
Yeah,
The success of this game, I think, so far is in that fucking soundtrack and in that visual style, but also really, I think, in the movement.
hmm
I'm impressed by the way that the character feels to control, and that's what's helping me get over the fact that I'm just not good at Metroidvanias, and I'm not necessarily super excited about this formula in a vacuum. I think
sure.
I love Metroid, and part of why I love Metroid is that world, that aesthetic. And I think it's a similar thing here in Ori. Then you add on to that a level of mechanical fluidity that I really appreciate, and it's a good game.
Yeah.
So I just got to the Jinzo tree
Okay.
for
That's the first. That's quote unquote dungeon of the game.
yes. So for context,
You
that
got just got
that's
into it.
there's a little the little long-legged man who stole my water
Gumo. Yeah.
my water orb. So I'm getting that back from him right now.
Okay. This is
Super.
exciting. This is exciting for me because I honestly, I kind of expected you to just skip to Will of the Wisps if you were going to play either of them,
Yeah.
because even though Ori and the Blind Forest is in my top 6 games of all time, Will of the Wisps just blows it out of the water. It's quite a Last of Us 2 situation, in my opinion,
Hmm.
in which the first is absolutely fantastic, but the foundation that it sets the sequel up for a complete reinvention of the formula, and makes it a lot better. Now, I've only played through Ori and the Blind Forest twice, and it has been a couple of years since I did that. Now, that is one of the first games that I remember really connecting to on a personal level, because I found myself unable to put it down. I beat that game in under a day, and I just ignored my meals, and I barely slept because I was just so engrossed with this gameplay loop and the mechanics and the aesthetic and all of that I just wanted to push through it, and I did, and that's why it's still one of my favorite games of all time. And while I think Will of the Wisps is better, and I honestly might go back and dabble around in the first one just to sort of refresh myself, and so I can have a little bit better conversation with you, as hopefully inevitably we end up talking about the game as more in the future as you get farther along in it. But yeah, it's exciting for me because god damn, it's one of my favorite games of all time.
What you just said, the sort of Last of Us to Last of Us Part Two comparison, is precisely why I started with Blind Forest, because hearing you and Lyndon talk about Will of the Wisps on our review, I don't necessarily think if I started there I would have gone back to Blind Forest.
Sure, yeah,
And
100%.
considering it's very important to note that I'm playing this game on my Xbox Series S, because Microsoft, to cap off this saga finally, sent me back my controller and my power cord, so I was able to actually hook up my Xbox and it's
And now
fixed and everything's good.
that is the fucking deal of the day right there, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
That is the crux that this past midnight episode is sitting on.
Yes.
And probably 80% of the episode content wise is going to be based on that same moment as well. But Ori and the Blind Forest, anything else you got to say about it? Early impressions, but
I mean, no, I don't think so. Like I said, it's the fluidity of the movement and the aesthetic that's carrying me along.
yeah.
I think that the gameplay is pretty satisfying, but pretty archetypical Metroidvania, which is totally fine. And I'm excited to finish it. I don't think it's especially long.
No, I mean, considering I beat it in under a day.
How long to beat.com put it about 8 hours. So I figured I'll probably be a little bit higher than that, because I'm already getting lost, because I'm just not very good at these sorts of games.
Mhm.
But like I said earlier, the fact that the movement is so good, I'm enjoying just even being lost in the world, because
Yeah.
it's fun to bebop around.
It does have a very good map system, so you shouldn't get super
It
lost.
it does have a very good map system. That is actually something that's important to note. The way that, of course, you can get the map stones and put them in, but just the fact that it'll very clearly delineate where you've been, where there's passage you can go off into, where you
Mhm.
left your last, what is it, the soul flare or something like that.
Yeah, your save point, whatever.
By the way, great mechanic,
Yeah.
setting down your own save points. So there's a lot that the game does that's pretty special. And like I said, playing it on my Xbox Series S looks gorgeous,
Mhm.
runs really well. Excited to play more.
Yeah. I guess I'll start with my main thing of the week, because I don't have a ton to talk about, but I gotta put this out there. I have talked about this game once or twice on BLB before, but I have gotten back into it in full force, and I can't believe my
It's not
eyes and
butter.
ears. Well, that, but I also can't believe it's not Bloodborne. Oh shit! Oh fuck! I'm proud of that. But Bloodborne is a game that I did talk about. We've had conversations about my personal irreverence to difficulty. Is I don't is that the word? I don't know if that's the right way to say it. I always try to use big words, and I just they're not quite there.
Ambivalence is the word you're thinking of.
Yeah, distaste, whatever, one of those. Is I don't like challenging games. I play on easy mode. I use rewind liberally. But Bloodborne, I'm actually not finding particularly difficult, which is interesting. But I think that's because I'm so incredibly engaged by this game's world and design that I'm going through it slowly and checking every nook and cranny and killing every enemy, and that is giving me the, I think, probably intended design of being over leveled. Is I'm taking the world so slowly that I'm collecting so many blood echoes and leveling myself up where I am over leveled for my area, and it's making it so I'm not uh, feeling particularly incredibly challenged by the bosses. Now, there have been a few that I've died a couple of times to, and I usually take in the AI partner or a friend to go in and fight the bosses. So I am playing on sort of like the lowest possible common denominator of difficulty for Bloodborne. But this game is engrossing and addicting in a way that I never thought I would be in one of these games, because
Sure.
I was always so turned off. I got into Central Yarnum my first time I played this game and just died a couple times to the first mob of them. I'm like, I don't get this. But I've since gotten into the combat, done probably 12 plus hours of lore video watching in the last few days,
Mm.
and watching playthroughs and learning everything I can about this game, and I'm hopelessly fucking addicted to it. I mean, like 5 hours a day for the last few days, and it's all I've really been playing.
That that's awesome. And that's basically I don't unfortunately I don't have too much to add.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting you say it's not particularly challenging. I think the
yeah,
overleveling component is part of it, but also we're both big Donkey fans. We talk about Donkey very often in these videos. But he famously said, and it stuck with me, that like these games aren't hard. It's dodge and hit. And once you
yeah.
realize it's dodge and hit, he said he's got some little rhyme I don't really remember off the top of my head. But are you finding yourself entering like that sort of rhythm while you're playing?
Yeah, so I'm pretty good at the combat. I would say I mostly avoid taking huge amounts of damage
That's a good strategy.
by taking, hold on, by taking one gigantic hit, going oh shit, panicking, hitting the fucking circle button a bunch of times and going ugh, and just getting out of there, and then reorienting myself, going in, doing a little bit of chip damage, dodging around. If I can get behind him, charge up a full attack hit, I'm like that kind of thing. So I am getting into the groove, but I still definitely do feel the panic, which I shouldn't be feeling if I
Sure.
really wanted to be good at the game. Um, but there's a huge fucking skill ceiling on this combat. It's absolutely ridiculous, and especially with the amount of that control you have over what you want your character to focus in terms of leveling up, and then kill runes and bloodstones and all of these things that you can use to upgrade your character in specific ways, and lots of different weapons, and the trick weapons having a larger expanded move set. Um, I am pretty good at the combat, but
Cool.
only just enough to make sure I'm not pissed off, because when I was bad at the combat, I was pissed off. This game like frustrated me. I'm like, I don't want to go back at it. And I think the fact that I have learned to use the lock on, which I didn't use when I was initially playing the game, which is a poor thing. And my good buddy Tanner Dykstra over there just got through God of War almost never using the lock on feature, because I don't think he knows how to use that properly, and it cost him some issues.
Hmm.
Um, but I will probably have more thoughts on Bloodborne as I go. But for those of you who have played, I just beat Rom the Vacuous Spider, so I'm a little bit over halfway, and that has given me access to Yahar Ghul, the Unseen Village, which is pissing me the fuck off because there's a lot of respawning enemies there, which is a mechanic no other area in the game has, as far as I know. So I decided to leave that be and go explore Canehurst Castle, which is a little bit more my speed, and I'll take it down whatever boss is there. But I'm having a great time with it.
I'm very glad to hear that, and I'm very interested to hear your thoughts evolve as you finish the game, and then see if you end up hopping into another Souls game.
Yeah,
The only one I've put any real time into is Sekiro,
yeah.
and from what I understand, they're pretty similar in terms of gameplay speed, in terms
Mhm.
of the more twitchiness to them. And I've heard that the checkpointing and the way that Sekiro is structured is pretty friendly. So it might be worth checking that out once you beat Bloodborne.
Yeah.
Um,
Game of the year last year.
yeah, 2 years ago.
Two-
Because now we're in the year of our Lord
Oh
2021.
fuck, that's right. Whatever. You know what I'm saying.
Now, Tucker, I've got 4 games to talk about,
That's a fucking lot. This is
and
gonna be
I
a long
finished
episode, but it's okay.
all of them. 2 of them I really love,
Yeah.
So I want to save those. I want to positivity. We're in a backload with positivity today.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Mirror's Edge.
Mm-hmm.
Mirror's Edge is a video game
You're
uh,
not wrong.
that I came to learn is developed by Dice, and
Yes.
Dice is known best for the Battlefield and Battlefront titles.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, Mirror's Edge is not particularly similar.
Not one of those. No.
It is a first person video game, and there are shooting elements, but it's a parkour title. It's a first person platformer, puzzle platformer in some respects,
Mm-hmm.
more of a twitchy platformer in others. And I just don't love this game the way other people do.
Mm-hmm.
I can look at what Mirror's Edge does and understand why people really enjoy it. And watching when I was getting stuck and I'd check out a video, watching people who can move through this game fluidly
Yeah.
are having a completely different experience than I am.
It's true.
But I just don't like this game very much.
Mm-hmm.
Some things I think are legitimately bad, and some are just design decisions I disagree with. The bad first, I think that the cutscenes are terrible. I don't. They're animated in this style that is incredibly low budget and
Yeah.
rob the game of a lot of weight in terms of narrative and feel pretty jarring. There are towards the end of the game some cutscenes just in engine, and those fit a little bit better. They give the characters a little bit more sense of weight. And the other thing that, speaking of weight, doesn't have any is the gunplay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a game that thankfully encourages you to avoid gunplay, and it's pretty fresh for an FPS. But considering that it does have FPS elements, and considering that Dice developed this game, I don't understand why the shooting feels as bad.
Mm-hmm.
If it's done to discourage the player, it probably shouldn't have been in there in the first place. I think that
Yeah.
the presence of armed attackers adds a sense of urgency to the platform, and it's really fun.
Yeah.
But when that urgency is transitioned into combat, the game kind of falls apart a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the only things that I think Mirror's Edge does legitimately bad.
Which is the gunplay and the cutscenes.
The gunplay, I think the entire narrative. The narrative
Okay.
is stronger when the cutscenes are in engine, but it still doesn't really make sense.
Sure.
They want you to care about these characters you don't care about. They throw you into the middle of this world with no real backstory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the narrative I think is pretty weak, and its presentation's even worse, and the
Yeah.
gunplay is somehow worse than that. The moment-to-moment gameplay is interesting, and I understand completely why the game is the way that it is. I mentioned very briefly a parallel to Sonic the Hedgehog, and what Sonic does
Mm-hmm.
and what Sega realized pretty smartly is that he's most fun when you're running fast. But if the entire game is running fast, you're missing so much of the experience,
Mm-hmm.
and that's hard to maintain momentum. It's hard to keep the player engaged in that experience. It almost becomes the Anthem problem where if you can fly anywhere, nothing has weight to it.
Sure.
So sometimes you need to slow your player down, and Mirror's Edge does that through inventively constructed puzzle platforming sequences that contrast the faster exterior, more reflex, more decision-based platforming.
Sure. Yeah.
And the interior puzzle locations, like I said, are well designed. But for me, the strength of Mirror's Edge, like in Sonic, is going fast. It's being on those rooftops and having to make the decision of I've got a chopper behind me, I've got these guys on the roof, I can go this way, I can go this way, I can figure things out and I can move and I can carry momentum and carry speed.
Yeah.
In these puzzle sections, I don't feel that. And instead I feel a lot of frustration, especially when I recognize that I am doing this jump 95% correctly, but it's that
Mm-hmm.
last 5% that the game doesn't give me. And like I said, I'm not very good at this game, so that's an important
Sure.
caveat. But something that I think was really interesting listening to how Matt makes games, the developer of Celeste talks about Celeste, is all of the little things that that game does that the player wouldn't notice to make the simple act of jumping work in the player's favor instead of being ambivalent towards them.
Yeah.
And I think that platforming games that are charitable towards the player are better, not only because they make the difficulty curve more smooth, but because they allow momentum to continue.
Mm-hmm.
Mirror's Edge in the platforming sequences constantly breaks your momentum because the game is not very forgiving or very soft in terms of grabbing edges, in terms of grabbing pipes, in terms
Mm-hmm.
of lining things up. And because of that, I found myself falling jump after jump and becoming discouraged instead of energized to push forward.
Sure.
And I beat the game, and I think it has a lot of good qualities, but the design philosophy behind it is understandable, but it's not one that I found especially compelling. So when I was having fun with Mirror's Edge, I was having a lot of fun. And when I was able to as people do when they parkour in real life, chain together these sequences and get a feel for my environment, I was really enjoying it. But when the pace gets slowed down, it became an experience that I see the appeal of, but didn't feel it all personally. So I think I gave the game like 2.5 stars on Backlogged. I think it's a
Interesting.
totally serviceable game, and I see why people love it, but I just didn't.
So I have an interesting relationship with Mirror's Edge. This was one of the first games that I feel like I sort of got into aesthetically when I was
Yeah,
picking up some more quote unquote mature games on Steam. I felt like I was edgy. I felt like I was grabbing some titles like a Bioshock, like a Mass Effect, like Mirror's Edge, as opposed to the fun jumpy indie games that I've been playing.
sure.
And I got into Mirror's Edge at a time that I don't think I was really caring much about narrative in games. I was mostly there for interesting gameplay conceits and aesthetic, which I think this game has one of the strongest aesthetics in gaming in as a whole. I
Yeah,
think that the design of the city and the way it uses color and stuff like that is absolutely fantastic and obviously the
definitely.
strongest suit of the game. And I don't think anyone really would contest that. But I think it's interesting what you say about the gameplay philosophy not being very forgiving in that small moments, unlike something like Celeste, because I think that is entirely intentional, and your disconnect from it is obviously a personal thing. But I think maybe you went into it not necessarily expecting that, because I think the idea of it being a parkour game, which are very rare, and using that sort of die and repeat and figure out the momentum and essentially get good at knowing the game's quirks,
Yeah,
like a more Twitch based, NES game, honestly, is something that it's rarer in this day and age. But it forces the player to use their momentum and movement creatively in a way that it doesn't give you the leeway to not be. And I think the game is really strong when it does that. But honestly, I don't remember a lot of that moment to moment stuff with Mirror's Edge because I played it probably in 2015. It's been a long time. What I do remember is the parts where you're moving fast, it's the set pieces, it's the music, it's the world design, all of that stuff, and that's what carries with me and why I still say to this day that I enjoy the game, because I don't really remember ever being super frustrated by it. And while I do remember those low budget cutscenes, I wasn't paying attention to the narrative, so I discounted that from my opinion. But I don't know. It's a game that I've really liked, but I under the caveat that it's been a fucking many times since I've played it.
yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think the idea of getting better at the game and becoming more empowered by these mechanics that are just kind of dropped in your lap is sensible, and I think that makes sense. But I think a problem that Mirror's Edge runs into is the game's about 6 hours long.
Hmm.
So you don't really have time over the course of your playthrough to even become empowered by the mechanics, I don't think.
Interesting.
Because because as your feet are getting under you, the game is wrapping up. And at the same time, the sort of creativity I think comes from injecting more player choice and agency into the platforming. But a lot of the interior sections don't give you choice. They give you a ledge you need to get to and a place you're standing on, and there's one way to get there.
Yeah, sure.
So I am actually interested to play Mirror's Edge Catalyst at some point, which is also on Game Pass. Keep in mind, I also
Hmm.
played Mirror's Edge on Game Pass on my
Yeah.
Series S. And seeing if they can expand on some of my issues and flesh out the game a little bit, because I do see promise and I did like elements,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It didn't click with me the way it clicks with a lot of people.
Okay, so I just was doing some research, as you said, it was 6 hours. It took me 11 hours to beat this game. And again, I played it forever ago, and I was significantly worse of a video game player back then. But I
Yeah.
don't think I felt that probably short runtime for someone who knows what they're fucking doing because I was a more inexperienced game player, and it did take me longer. So
Yeah.
that's something I couldn't really factor into my critiques. But um, I want you to hit me with one more game.
I'm gonna hit you with a GameCube game called Luigi's Mansion.
I remember you playing that.
So I
God,
love
this is
Luigi's
a
Mansion
fucking
3.
hearty week for you. Jesus Christ.
It's a hardy week. It's a hardy
Holy
week for
shit.
sure. Um, so Luigi's Mansion 3 is a game I absolutely love. I think it's one of Switch's best games. And so I played it at launch. Actually, I got a review code for it. Full disclosure, over
Hmm.
at Nintendad. Um, and I think it's exceptional. And my girlfriend also really likes it, and so she played it a little bit on my Switch. And then for Christmas this year, I bought her own copy so she can play through the game in its entirety on her Switch.
Well, very,
And
very
because
sweet of you.
yeah, I know, I'm me, and so that got me inspired because she's playing through it right now to go back to the original Luigi's Mansion, which I own on GameCube.
Yep.
It got ported to 3DS back in I think 2018, and I played some of the 3DS port but never beat it. So beating it on GameCube, again, another very short game, about 5-6 hours, um, was interesting. This is a game that I'm also pretty conflicted on. First of all, I think Luigi's Mansion 3 is far superior.
Yeah.
But it was curious to go back because people who talk about Luigi's Mansion talk about this game being just as strong, if not stronger, than 3. And I'm talking about people like
Mm.
Arlo, before he left his channel of like 11 years, the Bit Block. People who talked
Oh,
about
yeah. Okay. I thought
Luigi's
you were talking about
Mansion.
Arlo, and I was very
No.
fucking confused. I'm like, he uploaded a video yesterday?
Yeah, Arlo's still around, thankfully. But both of them really speak highly of this game, and I don't see it. What I see is a wonderful location. Mansion of Luigi's Mansion is one of the best realized game worlds I've ever gotten to be in. It's small and compact, and exploring its halls is fun, and you get a feel for it like it's your own house, and the way you go through it is really neat. It's a pretty linear game, also sort of like Resident Evil 4 is sort of a facsimile of non-linearity, but it's actually a pretty linear game the way it leads you through.
Yeah.
Um, and it's full of these ghosts that are really fun and creative, and the game just has a great sense of personality. And Luigi himself has never been more personable than
Hmm.
this game. He's got jiggle
Even with
physics,
3, would you say?
even with 3.
Hmm.
The animation in 3 is stunning, and it's not been topped in a Nintendo game, I don't think. But there's a very distinct personality in the original.
Hmm.
Luigi's nose has jiggle physics. He runs like he's a fucking locomotion train all the time. He'll start whistling along to the music. He's just a really charming character. Before he became the sort of goofy, scaredy cat he's sort of fallen into in the modern Mario titles, he was this kind of just eccentric and weird Luigi in Luigi's Mansion.
Hmm.
So all that is great. The gameplay though is not. It just
Okay.
isn't. It's a fishing game. Literally, it's a fishing game. You cast out, you cast the ghost, so you spark him with your flashlight, then you pull back on the stick, and you let him take you for a ride, and that's the entire gameplay system.
Hmm.
The combat has absolutely zero depth or nuance to it. Um, what they do is they supplement that with puzzle mechanics. A lot of the ghosts you can't actually suck up until you've exposed their heart, and you have to do various things to accomplish that. But the puzzles you have to solve range from insultingly simple to stupefyingly arcane, and there's no sense of difficulty curve here at all.
Sure.
Absolutely zero. And because of that, the game just it doesn't really get its teeth in you. You go from room to room, and sometimes you're in a room for literally 30 seconds.
Hmm.
Oh, here's a little Nana, and she's knitting. And how do I expose her heart? Well, the only thing I can really interact with are these 3 yarn balls, so I'll shoot them at her. Or sometimes the puzzles are like, okay, here's some people dancing over there. Stand on the other side of the room and don't face them, and wait for them to make a sound, and then spin around and hit them with your flashlight. Like, why would I? There's
Sure.
just an inconsistency in design philosophy here that's frustrating. And because of that, I like being in this world, but I'm a gameplay first guy, and because of that, I'd much rather be playing Luigi's Mansion 3.
Honestly, I played probably 2 hours of Luigi Mansion 3, and I have no experience with either of the other games. And I don't have a lot to say about it. I think while I obviously do really like the aesthetic of Luigi's Mansion 3, and I like the characters of that are more uniquely Luigi's Mansion with
Yeah,
Egad and with Luigi and the different, boss ghosts that you have. I think they're all really charming. I was never really compelled enough by the simple act of sucking things up in 3 to explore more. And I think that, maybe if I played a little bit more, I'm not nothing against the game. I do
sure.
want to get back to it. I If I had gotten hooked by that, it would have pushed me through. But unfortunately, in a little bit of time that I did play, I didn't really get hooked by that. But I kind of do want to play the first one because obviously a lot shorter experience, something that's a little more foundational, and just because as if we look back 2 episodes ago to our gaming
Resolutions are, yeah.
resolutions. Yes, I couldn't remember that word. I don't know why. I do want to play more GameCube games this year, and I
Sure.
think I would like that to be one of them, just to have it in my under my belt in my repertoire. But yeah, don't have a lot to say about it. It's interesting to me that that game didn't click with you. In my mind, if before this, we had talked about this, I probably would have said, I'm sure Abram likes Luigi's Mansion. I'm sure that's a game he played when he was a kid, and he has a good time with it. But you can certainly surprise me sometimes.
I know, and I like to surprise you, and I do enjoy the game, and especially at its very short runtime, I think it is worth going through, largely on the back of its creativity in terms of its aesthetic and in terms of just the wacky personality. And there is, at very least, a tactile fun to the game playing with the GameCube controller. Because if you're clicking and clacking the sticks around trying to grab the ghosts and you're pulling down those shoulder buttons, there is a sort of like visceral, like actual, I'm a person and my hands are touching this controller satisfaction to the gameplay.
Sure.
But it's really one note. And I think that Luigi's Mansion 3, having not, keep in mind, I've never played Dark Moon. I would like to this year. But Luigi's Mansion 3 adds so many more elements to it that this game just doesn't have. So it feels much more conceptual than really like a fully fleshed out experience.
Sure. I'd like actually, that's a very good philosophy for that to transfer to something in the same universe. We're going to be talking about another
Okay.
Mario game.
All right.
Super Mario 3D Land. Of course, another one of my gaming resolutions was to finish the 3D Marios that I hadn't, which would be 3D Land into Galaxy 2. So I will
what about New Super Mario Brothers 2?
What the fuck?
It's
That's
in
not a 3D
3D.
Mario. Oh, god damn it. So I recently received Super Mario 3D Land from Amazon. Popped it in my 3DS. I was playing a little bit. I don't get that game. It's such a weird amalgamation of ideas that I don't think is fleshed out in any particular way. It's a baseline idea of, hey, let's do 3D, let's do 2D level design philosophy in 3D environments, which cool, sets it apart from the other ones. Great. But these levels are so bare bones. They focus on one mechanic that they don't flesh out. They don't combine those mechanics in really particularly interesting ways. Keep in mind, I'm only 2.5 worlds in, but you can get through the levels in barely any time at all. They're not challenging. They don't look particularly great. Visually, they're not super engaging. And well, I actually do enjoy the Tanuki leaf. I think it's fun to use. Overall, the game completely lacks a sense of its own identity because it's just generic Mario blocks floating around. And I don't know. I just think it's a very peculiar part of Mario's history. As I started up and I was bopping around in the first few worlds, I'm like, hey, maybe there's a little bit to this. Maybe people don't give it a bad rap for an unfair reason. But I'm starting to fall into the camp that feels like 3D Land is just kind of in its own bubble and should stay that way.
I don't think it's in its own bubble. What I think it is instead is a game that has been completely surpassed by what's come
Yes.
after it. It's like a new it's the new, speaking of 3DS games, it's the new Super Mario Brothers 2 of its series.
Sure.
You would never go back and play New Super Mario Brothers 2 when you could be playing a U instead, for example. And there's no reason to be playing a 3D Land when you could be playing a 3D World. I really enjoyed 3D Land a lot at the time. I got it Christmas 2011. I got my 3DS Christmas 2011 with Majora's Mask, with Ocarina of Time 3D and 3D Land and Mario Kart 7. So that was a pretty good Christmas for an 11-year-old little Abram. Sure. And I really enjoyed the game, and I ran through it and I did the other worlds, but I've never gone back to it. I've got no intention to. And that's because it took the 2D formula and it put it in 3D and it said, here's your game. And it came at the perfect time to boost 3DS sales.
Yep.
It was an impressive use of 3D. I think it's a mechanically solid and totally fun Mario game. But 3D World is just such a creative experience.
Yeah.
That it's done. It's over. It's a wrap.
No, it is. I mean, I have not beaten 3D World, but I've played enough of that game to know that it's just so much better. I mean, the worlds are more visually engaging. Of course, there's multiplayer. It has its own identity with the cat suits and the double cherries, and the music is a lot more interesting and iconic, and the levels are more varied. 3D Land, one of the things I think frustrates me the most about it is that it foregoes any sense of cohesion to give you those 2D levels in a 3D space.
Right.
It throws fun platforms at you to test if you can jump good, but the worlds are, for the most part, I've run into a couple that trying to challenge this. just are completely disconnected. And even the world map is a line with a generic background, and the levels can be whatever they damn well please.
Yeah.
There's not even desert world theme. Here are the desert levels that keep the game aesthetic, build on the mechanics, whatever. No, it's like, okay, here's one with fans. Here's one with, a certain kind of enemy that you have to deal with. And I think that lack of cohesion, which is something that I like in Galaxy and in Sunshine and even in something like Super Mario Bros. 3, just makes me feel like there's not too much to this game, and it feels like the bare bones of what a Mario game can be.
I think that's definitely fair. I think it's also important to recognize the context of its release being the only dedicated 3D handheld Mario, unless you want to talk about Super Mario 64 DS, and I don't, so you can be quiet.
Mhm.
I was talking to the audience, not you. If you want to talk about it, you've never played this game. I've never played that game, actually.
I have.
But
You made
my
a weird assumption about me there.
well, I suppose. You know what happens when we assume. You think the other person played Mario games, and it basically what I'm saying is that 3D World, in the context of being a really accessible and bite-sized Mario experience, I think that variety works in its favor.
Mhm.
If this is a Mario game you're playing for 10, 15 minutes at a time, I think
Sure.
that the variety services the gameplay better. And I think that in the context that this game was released, it had merit, but we're not in that context anymore.
Yeah.
So for a bunch of different reasons, it's been chipped away at by so many other games, and it's unfortunate. I personally would have loved to see a 3D World port. This would have taken effort on Nintendo's part. So this never would have happened. But a 3D World port that just up-res to 3D Land levels
Yeah.
and
That
sort
would
of
have been
like
great.
a bonus game context, even make it a mini game, like a rush mode, like Coin Rush in New Super Mario Brothers 2D, where you're running through a bunch of levels in quick succession. Something
Yeah.
like that, I think, would service this gameplay better.
Sure.
But we're in the year of our Lord 2021, not 2011.
Yeah.
So
It's been
get with the
10 years.
times,
Whole
Mario.
decade.
You know.
Mario 3D Land is not old enough to drink or drive yet, though. It will be someday, and we'll celebrate it.
Well, I mean, we won't, but we can say that we will.
I'm planning making a 3D Land can drink video in another 10 years, 11 years.
Well, it's good to see you have long-term goals.
Now, so you have two other games to talk about, and I know what they are, but I want to throw a little bit of a wrinkle in this because I have a friend by the name of Tanner Dykstra,
Mhm.
and he is going to join this call and give us a thought on a game that he played because he's not, he's not known as the gaming guy. He likes video games a lot. He's the one with the PS5, but he doesn't complete a lot of games. He's not in the same vein as you and I are, and that's the reason he's not on this content very often. But he really did game this week. Let me fucking tell you, he gamed. So I'm gonna get him in here, and I'll edit out the space if there is some, but
Sure.
we will see what happens. So here we are with said Tanner Dykstra,
Oh my God, I'm here.
the gamer of the hour, as some might say, because he has gamed for many hours in the past few days,
Yeah,
and he's
I
gonna
like
talk
to-
about it.
I like to say that I played more video games in the last 3 to 4 days than I did maybe all of last year. And in that time, I finished the 2018
Yeah.
God of War game. One of the PS4 classics, PlayStation classics. So I thought I'd get into it. Obviously, I never played any of the previous games, but I had some knowledge of the series going in. And while I was waiting for YouTube buglugs to shut up about video games, I wrote down some quick notes. So, the first thing I really had notes upon was the combat, which is obviously a big draw of the game. It's an action game. I told Tucker this. It got more fun as I progressed through the game. Tucker witnessed me sort of in my first big like free form boss fight, and I
That
had
was
a little.
rough.
I was getting frustrated. I'm
Oh
not gonna
God,
lie.
that was sad.
It
Not
was
gonna lie.
pitiful. It was
Yeah.
pitiful. It was like a baby taking its first steps. If I could compare
That's
it to that.
pitiful. That's
Yes, I have
that's
pity.
triumphant.
I have pity on children and babies. But yeah, as I progressed, I realized that Yeah, I had more fun in combat. I wasn't worried as much about dying. I was really using the abilities that I had upgraded into. It does become monotonous at a point, but I feel like it is saved by the story progression of the game. I feel like that's the case with a lot of games, though. In that monotony, a lot of the mid-tier enemies, there's some witches, there's some bigger enemies. They became more annoyances because you can't really cut through them like you could with hordes, and they don't really have like the patterns that big bosses have. You just kind of gotta it's sort of middling in modernity there. So in modernity, no,
No.
monotony. That's the word I was looking for. Thank
Reject
you.
modernity, embrace monotony.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about, baby. What a show! Speaking of boss fights, that first opening fight with Balder just is a fucking great hook into the game.
Oh yeah,
It's
it is.
it's fun. It challenges you just a little bit, but it's got scale to it. But then obviously that's brought back with like the final fight with Balder, even on an even larger scale. That's more fun. That makes use of all the abilities that you've gained, as well as spoilers for the game. By the way, it came out like 3 years ago. Um, you actually, obviously, I have some previous knowledge of the series, but you actually do get Kratos's Blades of Chaos
Mhm.
about towards the end of the game, and that's sort of like the fire attack, and your axe is that you have from the beginning of the game is the ice attack, so you have to switch those up in that fight. So just overall, that's a really great sort of culmination of what you've learned in the game so far. Also, I really like the Magnite and Modi fight. When you fight the Thor's sons. Basically, all the fights with gods are really cool.
So
Uh,
let's just see, because I know you haven't played a lot of the big PS4 exclusive games, or
yeah.
like at least to completion. So this being one of your earlier ones of those, I think it might be getting you into checking out and completing some of the other games. Is this is this one of your new favorites? How does this stack up, just on a
Um.
general level?
Well, I have it at a 4.5 out of 5, just
That's very
because
good.
it's a very solid game, and it just gets weighed down slightly by like the monotony of it. Like I think this game could have handled to be shortened up a few hours.
Sure.
The story is good and very interesting. It just if you could cut an hour out of it, I feel like it diverges too many times through the main story.
Sure.
Like there was multiple times I had to remind myself, like, that's right, the end goal of this game is to spread some ashes. That's the end goal of this game. And
Mhm.
I'm fighting a fucking giant, and I'm inside of a snake. I'm inside of a giant goddamn snake right now. So it diverged a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Um, I really liked Atreus and Kratos. They were a very good pairing. Atreus has a really have a very compelling character arc. Most compelling in the parts where he's just fucking annoying once he learns out that he's part god. He's like, we can do whatever we want. We're gods. I'm a fucking annoying child. I hated him, and there's something to be said for a voice actor even that can make you hate them so much.
Sonny
Uh,
Soljic, by the
through
way.
the okay. I also want to shout out do you know who the voice actor for Kratos
Christopher
was?
Judge.
Just that fucking giant booming voice, gravelly voice.
It's so fucking good,
It's
dude. I would
boy.
be up here in my room and I would hear Kratos and Atreus bantering down there, like over the combat. I'm like, oh fuck. Some of my favorite device acting, to be honest.
Yeah. As I said, spoilers. There's a few dropped plot lines, like how Atreus hears voices sometimes. I assume that'll be picked up in the sequel, which I'm actually super excited for now, because big spoilers for the end of the game. It turns out that Atreus is actually Loki, which is fucking wild and sort of like goes against the canon of actual Norse mythology. But what the fuck ever. That's super interesting, and I'm sure they're cooking up something real good for this year, right? That's when Ragnarok comes out.
I sure fucking hope so.
Yeah.
Because look, this is one of my favorite games of all time. This is
Yeah.
another game, like earlier in this episode, we talked about Ori and the Blind Forest, that I just could not put down. When I started
Yeah.
this game, the pacing, the combination of the side content into the main story, the ways that the characters flow together, the dialogue, the voice acting,
Mm-hmm.
the upgrades, the exploration, and all of the things that come with like the puzzles and the combat. I feel like there's such a good balance between all of those mechanics and the way that
Yeah.
the world flows together that I just burned through that game, and I was going for the platinum, and then I realized, oh fuck, I'm not as good at the combat as I thought I was. These Valkyrie fights are really fucking hard.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of secrets that are very easy to miss.
Yes.
So I decided to drop that. But overall, that's one of my favorite games of all time, and I'm very, very glad that you are getting into a game, completing it. You know, you can put that on your thing and say, hey, I've beaten this game, and
Yeah.
moving on to something else. And hopefully that's something else grabs you like this did, that you can
Mhm.
keep adding things under your belt. And, you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on some other games.
Yeah.
So, one last thought.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm taking your advice, and I'm gonna take it chill for a little bit. I'm gonna beat some shorter games like I have Journey and What Remains of Edith Finch. I'm gonna knock those out next, and then probably get into, well, I won't spoil what I'm gonna get into after that.
Oh
but,
shit!
Yeah.
Intrigue.
Yes, because I don't know. I'm becoming a gamer, lads. I don't know what else to say. So
I don't know what to do with you. You're gonna be hogging that TV all the time, but it kind of makes me happy.
oh, okay.
All right,
Thank you.
well, thank you for joining us. We will get back
Yes.
to our regularly scheduled banter about our backlogs.
Of course. So long.
Bye.
Good old little applause for one Mr. Tanner Dykstra in
Yes.
his God of War review. It was a very nice surprise, I think, for the audience. But I want to talk about another tentpole first party franchise,
Okay.
but it's not one that belongs to Sony. It belongs
does
instead
not.
to Microsoft. And I want to talk to you a little bit about Halo.
One might say a competitor of Sony.
One might say a competitor, and one would be correct because that's just an objective fact. But this week, I completed Halo 2
Mhm.
and I completed Halo 3.
God, Jesus Christ. You're a madman. You're a fucking madman. You can't stop you. And I'm excited for it. My voice is going up an octave.
Tucker, I might be a madman, but I'm also a ginormous fucking Halo fan. Let me tell you something. These are some of the most special narrative shooters I've ever played. What Bungie has done, and I wrote this in my backlogged review for Halo 3.
Interesting. I didn't know
Bungie,
you had made those.
over the course of the first 3 games, are in a fucking arms race with themselves to make the most refined first-person sci-fi shooter that they possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that as you track through the first 3 games. I love both. I think that Halo 3 is the stronger gameplay experience, and I think that Halo 2 is the stronger narrative experience.
Okay, interesting.
And because of that, I think both are really worth playing, and both replaying for different reasons. I think that the movement in Halo 2, I think, would really speak to you, because one of your complaints with Combat Evolved was the way that a lot of lore elements like the Covenant didn't get a lot of play.
Mm-hmm.
You get a ton of play here in Halo 2, and I don't want to spoil anything that happens, but these sort of like interpersonal relationships in the Covenant and the way that different factions break off and vie for power, it's really fascinating. And the way that narrative is juxtaposed against Chief's narrative, it's really awesome. And the way that they intertwine really cements, I think, Halo's narrative strength, which is combining these more heavy, mature lore elements with this more over-the-top and Saturday morning-esque personality that combines in something really, really special.
Sure.
And because you don't really know anything about what happens in Halo 2, I don't want to get more specific than that.
I don't know.
Because it's pretty wacky and it's really, really fun.
The interesting thing is, I don't, because at the moment, I wouldn't say I care. I don't think the end of the first game particularly intrigued me story-wise. Well, I don't have a ton of complaints about the story of the first game. I don't think it left me on a hook. Honestly, I can't remember the ending of the first game, which I played 8 months ago, something like that.
Sure.
But I'm not opposed in the fucking slightest to trying these games. Now that it's clear that they can be beaten in a totally reasonable amount of time, I honestly might put them under my belt within the next few weeks. Like that might be something I'd bounce around to.
Yeah, and I mean, 2 shows big strides over 1 in terms of things like level design, so in terms of variety, in terms of widening the arsenal. There's a lot of great things they do. But then you get to Halo 3, and Bungie's like, remember Halo 2? Forget about Halo 2, because we got Halo 3 now. And this is where the gameplay goes from pretty refined to incredibly refined. Of course, playing Halo 2 on Xbox Series S, I have the Master Chief Collection and the anniversary edition of Halo 2. So I've got
Yeah.
the aesthetic upgrade, and that game is gorgeous. So going to Halo 3 is an obvious visual downgrade, but the fact is the anniversary edition is still built on an original Xbox game. The
Mhm.
jump from original Xbox to 360 pays great dividends in terms of the way that levels feel more organic. It feels like you're
Yeah.
in actual living, breathing places. And these places have weight, and they've got different geometry and different environmental factors and features that open up really great firefight possibilities that maintain a lot of the arena appeal of Halo 1, Halo 2, and add some more corridors and balance the gameplay pretty well.
Oh,
And
no, not more corridors. Too many corridors in Halo 1.
well, what's interesting about
Too many of the same corridors in Halo 1.
well, that's the thing. These are different corridors.
Yeah,
and
no,
they-
I expect there to be a little bit of progression in the series.
Yeah, and it's very clear going from 2 to 3 that we're on 360 now, and these worlds are not copy and pasted hallway room,
The
hallway
library,
room,
though?
hallway
I
room.
love the library.
That's just such a weird opinion to hold.
God,
But
I love
speaking
having
of
that
the
opinion.
speaking of the library, the Flood, which I have found consistently frustrating to fight in Halo 1 and Halo 2,
Mhm.
are excellent in Halo 3
Okay.
because they're more of an actual species. So as you're fighting them, you'll see some of them evolve and mutate. You
Okay.
see Flood that are clearly being born out of particular enemies, but other Flood that are so far gone that they're not really recognizable as coming from a Covenant brute or from a UNSC soldier. That is
Mhm.
more like lizard-like Flood. There's a lot more variety there, and that makes the combat feel fresher, and it's a lot less cheap too. You're not going to find 18 Flood hiding as though they're Viet Cong soldiers with fucking rocket launchers to one-hit Chief. It's a lot more of a fair and fun challenge. And I mean, it's just the gunplay is so good. It's more cinematic. It's more grounded. It's just an excellent game. And all of a sudden, Halo has quickly become one of my favorite franchises. Period.
Mhm.
And the only reason that I went to Ori instead of going to Halo 3 ODST or Reach, which I want to play before I go to the 343 games being 4 and 5,
Yeah.
is that I want to make this franchise last a little bit longer.
Sure. And
Because
I
I don't
think breaking up that run is a good idea just to give yourself a little bit of space in order to probably appreciate the other games a little more. Make sure they don't float, go together a little bit too much.
yeah. But I really love these games. I think that the shooting is just so unique and precise, and having this more classical arena style sensible shooter and this more modern Halo 3 context is just so unique, and it's just a studio in Bungie that's just at the top of their game.
Sure.
They're just at the top of their game, dude, in Halo 3. In Halo 2 also, but playing them back to back, for as excellent as Halo 2 is, Halo 3 is just fucking walking around with his chest puffed out.
Interesting.
And man, these games are great.
I say interesting because, in all honesty, as someone entirely looking in from the outside of the Halo, fandom or whatever, and honestly, even Xbox in general, I haven't been an Xbox person. I don't think I've almost ever heard anyone talk about Halo 3. I hear Reach, I hear 2, I hear Combat Evolved, and I hear the controversies of 4 and 5. But 3 has always, in my mind, been the black sheep of the series that I don't hear people reference. And it's very interesting to hear you say that it's at least in some regards, leagues above 2.
Well, it's widely lauded as one of the best, if not the best, Halo games.
Okay, well, I've never heard anyone say that before.
Sure, which I think just sort of shows that you're viewing these games from an outsider's lens and outsider's perspective,
Mhm.
as I was too before I actually got into the games. But Halo 3 is fucking huge, especially at the time, dude. That game was fucking huge when it came out, and it's still beloved today, especially its multiplayer and its sandbox focus and a lot of things that introduced like equipment and different weapon types and everything and different vehicle types. There's a lot of great vehicle variety here. It's just such a refined experience. And it understands what made Halo 1 and 2 great and cuts out some of the fat, like some of the more spongy enemies, some of the more forgettable design. And it's just tightened down to I would say probably 6-hour campaign.
Sure.
That just feels great. And because of that, and I texted you this, my most anticipated games of 2021 list, which will be up, I think the day after this video goes live, is completely outdated, spoiler alert, because my number one most anticipated game now is Halo Infinite.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And I would say that I mean, obviously glad you're becoming a Halo fan, but the fact is you're a Bungie Halo fan. You have not yet experienced the games made by 343 Industries, which of course have their conflict around it, and of course Halo Infinite in its own bubble has its own conflicts. The game hasn't released. Don't have any thoughts about it. But I would be interested to see if your hype for the game changes as you play more of the series once you get to the developers who are making the next game.
I mean, there's something to be said for that, but there's also something to be said for the fact that A, it's a soft reboot, B, it's got a lot of the original talent from the original Bungie games back on it. C, they're clearly, as being demonstrated with the gameplay we have seen, returning to a sort of synthesis of the old and the new. And then something to be
Sure.
said for the fact that I am a fucking enormous Star Wars fan, and Star Wars has changed hands so many times. And love of a particular era of the franchise, even if another era is weaker or different, that doesn't cancel each other out.
Sure.
That we're entering a new era with Halo Infinite. It's very clear that this is going to be something different, and the more esports heavy 4-5 fast sprint enhanced mobility ADS gameplay, it's going to be in Halo Infinite, but Halo Infinite's also being its own thing, and I think
Sure.
that's exciting. Like, that's a more open world game in a lot of senses.
Yeah.
And Halo 3 ODST is also more open from what I understand, but I haven't played that yet. So
Okay. Well, thus ends the Halo segment. I'm very glad that you're getting to this rhythm of starting game, getting through it, beating it, and being able to talk about it. I mean, this is, you're tackling one of your resolutions head on, and I genuinely applaud you for it.
yes.
But I'm going to end this episode with something a little bit special. This is Arcade Variety Hour here with Tucker Hazel. Welcome, everyone. Episode 1 of 1 ever. I don't think I'm ever going to have a chance to talk about Arcade Variety Hour again because I visited the Video Game Museum, the VGM, in Frisco, Texas, on my way back to Lincoln, Nebraska from Austin, Texas. And that was a fucking experience and a half. Absolutely fantastic museum. The production design, which I never would have thought to say about a museum, is off the fucking walls, dude. It's insane. They have Easter eggs around the thing that you can play a little meta narrative game with. They go through all sorts of different areas of games. They have so many unique artifacts of gaming history, including a Power Glove prototype, which they contest is the only one in the world, which is fucking wild. But they also have multiple arcades in it that are set up in the format of an 80s arcade, so you can get into that atmosphere again and really feel like you're recapturing the glory days, which of course I wasn't alive for, so I'm not reliving those glory days. I'm creating my own ones. But I was able to play a solid handful of arcade games here. Alongside, I played a little bit on these test systems of ET on Atari, Adventure on Atari, and a giant fucking game of Pong with a screen 20 feet tall, which was fun. I played Pong with my dad on these steering wheels of controllers. But I don't know how much experience you have with arcade games in general, especially specific arcade cabinets. You have anything to say about that?
My experience is pretty top level. A lot of the most high level arcade games I really love. I really love Galaga, and I still love Galaga. Pac-Man, is whatever. Mappy is whatever. But outside of the Namco headliners, I really have little experience.
Sure. So I have played a little bit. I've always been drawn to arcades in whatever capacity I can. Unfortunately, we live in the modern era where arcades don't exist unless you're gonna pay out the wazoo to go to God, I can't remember the name of the place, Dave and Buster's or something like that, where they do have arcade cabinets, but then it's a giant touch screen Fruit Ninja, or it's the new arcade Mario Kart or something like that. A lot of bigger, flashier stuff and less, joystick Twitch controls kind of deal. So I relished the opportunity to go back and try a few games, which I played some classics, played some Defender, I played some Cubert, played some Moon Patrol, some Joust with my dad. Those were fun, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about the weird ones that I played. I'm here to talk about Junior Pac-Man, which is, of course, a long forgotten Pac-Man sequel in which you play as Pac-Man with a little spinning top on top of his head, presumably his son, with not much changed. There are larger arenas that take up more than just the one screen, so you can do a little bit of exploration, quote unquote. And there are slightly higher production value cutscenes in between that tell a little bit of a story. But other than that, it's just Pac-Man, nothing big. I also played Pac-Mania, which is Pac-Man from an isometric view with a world select system, which is pretty interesting. You get to choose your difficulty through which world you want to go to, and also with a jump You can jump over the ghosts, which is fucking wild. This another long forgotten Pac-Man sequel that has not seen the light of day, as far as I know, in a long time. But I also played Gyrus, which is sort of a Galaga Galaxian style game where you're shooting down waves of enemies, but it's from the perspective of a well, like you're looking down, you go in like a circle. So it doesn't really change much of the gameplay, but it certainly gives it a little more of an immersive feel. I actually really enjoyed that one a lot. Has some really good sound effects and a nice beat to it. I was, tap my foot as I was destroying the enemies. I'm like, oh shit, getting to an arcade game was pretty fun. Another shooty spacey game that I played, Asteroids Deluxe, which is just asteroids, but they have placed it farther down into the cabinet and put a little bit of an overlay over it. So there's like green lights coming at it from the sides and stuff, and it gives a little more of an immersive feel. But it's just fucking asteroids. Although I think it added a little spaceship that breaks into the bits and they all come for you. So there's a little bit of extra challenge, a little bit of gameplay tweak, but nothing huge. And then finally, actually, one more arcade game. I played Outrun, which is a racing game, which you use a actual steering wheel and pedal to control. Or wait, was this Road Blasters? I played 2 racing games, and one of them had haptic feedback to it. And whenever you went off the road, shit, which one was it? Fuck. Must have been Road Blasters, actually. Fuck, I can't remember. They kind of blend together in my head. No, it was Outrun. It was definitely Outrun. So when you go off the road or you crash into something, there's like this, and it like shakes the cabinet and it gives it a really interestingly immersive feel to it that I had never experienced in an arcade cabinet. I was kind of shocked the first time it happened. My dad said he heard that from across the arcade and said, "Oh, I remember that back in the day, the shake of an Outrun cabinet." Apparently an iconic noise. But those were the arcade games that I played. I don't know if you have anything to say about any of those, but
They are games that you played with your hands.
yeah. Okay. Well, thought you'd have a little more to say, but I also played. This is the final thing of the day. I don't have anything after this. I don't know if you do.
I'd like to make a proclamation, but that's all I'd like to do after.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna finish off with Baku Baku Animal. Have you
I
heard
love
of
this
Baku
game.
Baku Animal? No, you don't, because you've never heard of it, because I didn't know it existed. It's a Sega Saturn exclusive. I think might be Japanese exclusive. I can't really tell. It is a puzzle game that is sort of like a panel de pawn, sort of like a Yoshi. I'm card in the corner of the last episode where I played Yoshi, in which you drop down blocks of animals and food. You build a little stack of food corresponding to the animals, and you drop the animal on top of it, and they go and they munch away those blocks. And they do it in the most heinously animated 3D models I've ever fucking seen in my life, of this monkey who gets giant fucking teeth and go just like a really disgusting noise that it makes. It's a weird fucking game that I had never heard of before, and there are a total of 6 people who have ever logged it on backlogged, and it doesn't even have proper box art. It doesn't even have proper, like, it's an enigma as far as I know, and my first time ever playing a Sega Saturn game. But Baku Baku Animal, I can't say I recommend it, but it was a interesting experience for me to play a Saturn game, a game that no one talks about, a game that is completely obscure, that does a weird puzzle thing formula, has terrible, heinous 3D models. That was a weird experience. I just had to bring it up because, will anyone ever else bring up Baku Baku Animal in your presence? No. I gotta be the guy. I gotta do it,
I'm certainly gonna at least check out a trailer for that, because that sounds.
Will there be a trailer for it? I don't know. I'll do a little
God.
research while you're doing your proclamation. Proclamate me.
As we're recording, it's 1:18 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I like, just the will to not to live but to be awake has just completely vacated my body. So all I'm left with is a reduced filter and a hill to die on. That's all I'm left with right now.
Oh Christ! I don't know if this is gonna be a good thing.
The Xbox Series S is a marvelous console.
Okay.
And Microsoft has, from the consumer's perspective, the best ecosystem to be in.
Interesting.
And playing with my Series S makes Sony look kind of stuffy
Hmm.
and makes Nintendo look terrible.
Sure.
The level of quality of life, the level of services, the customizability, everything about this ecosystem is incredible. And it's a wonderful machine for experiencing not next gen titles because I'm always going to have my PS5 for that, but experiencing past generation games cleaned up visually, faster load times, better frame rates.
Hmm.
It's an incredible machine that lets you experience more of the industry of where we've been instead of where we're going. And I think that's something that's truly special. And it enables you to come to conclusions like the fact that Sony is winning the exclusives war in a lot of senses, but in a big sense in terms of optics. Because when you actually get into Microsoft's first party, they have a lot more of a diverse and interesting first party than Sony does.
Sure.
Sony has an incredibly successful but very narrow first party catalog. We talk about your Last of Us's, your God of Wars, your Days Gones, your Horizons.
Hmm.
You're looking at the third person action game with a mature slant, and that's what they have.
Yeah.
You can even put your Spider-Mans in there. And they take these offshoots and they take their diversions, but they're not particularly big. Insomniac is providing that with Ratchet a little bit more, but even Ratchet is more of a nod to a bygone era, and none of that is to disparage the obvious fidelity and success of Sony's lineup, because
Hmm.
it's really incredible, and some of my favorite games of all time are in there. It's incredible. I'm not disparaging it, but what I am saying is that Microsoft's first party has been completely misrepresented,
Hmm.
and I'm glad that I have the opportunity to actually get inside of it. Because as I play games like Ori, as I play games like Halo, as I look at a Sunset Overdrive, as I get ready to try the Medium when that comes out through Game Pass, and
Sure.
when I look at the accessibility of these things, when I think about trying Forza and realizing Forza is two button pushes away on a $15 subscription, I start to think to myself that I might be way more of an Xbox fan than I ever realized.
Sure.
And it's a testament to the fact that Phil Spencer turned the ship around. And I really think that there is a future where Xbox can, assuming that they don't move to the publisher realm, to the more service-based realm, and if they're still releasing hardware, I think there's a future where I'm much more compelled by what they have to offer than what Sony has to offer, and in some respects, even what Nintendo has to offer.
Sure.
And that's my proclamation for the evening.
I mean, that's an incredibly solid proclamation, not one that I think I can provide too much insight on. My experience with the Microsoft first party library is very limited. I've got my Halos and my cup or my Auras and my Cupheads. I played Halo Combat Evolved. I just played Banjo, which is a retroactive first party game, I guess you could say. And now the Bethesda games are so Skyrim, Doom, Fallout 4, but I've always looked in on Xbox, and maybe this is a bigger discussion for another day, is how they're perceived. But as the guys who obviously, as people have been want to say, the guys who make Forza and Halo and Gears and their other stuff doesn't get the light that it probably deserves. Because what they do is co-opt a lot of studios into becoming those first party studios. You've got your Rares and you've got all the guys that they've recently done it, and they publish a lot of things, which make them first party games. And I think that they build out their library that way for sure. But I would like to get experience with more of their games, because it is a hole in my gaming knowledge. And you know what? You're tackling another one of your gaming resolutions right here, is
I
to
am.
to pick up your Segas and your Xboxes and fill in those holes. But I don't really have a way to do that at the moment. I have access to an Xbox Series X, no, Xbox One X rather, uh, though it's not mine, and I can't play it as much as I would want to because it's not mine and I share it with other people. And I don't personally see a lot of drive to purchase one of their newer consoles, because I have ways to access their content in a margarine. No, that is not anything close to the word I was meaning to say. A majority is not the word either. Wow. A large amount of ways. Uh, whether it be some of the bigger games on Game Pass being available on PlayStation, which I've already purchased, or on Steam for pretty cheap. Their games being available on PC, on Steam a lot of the time. Or some of the smaller games being available on older consoles. I have access to those very cheap as well because I have a lot of the older consoles. So those new Xbox consoles, while I think that there is clearly some value in them, I just don't personally feel the draw to drop a large sum of money on something when I could be getting those experiences in downgraded ways, but in other places.
And this is a discussion for a different time for sure. But
Sure.
$300 in the comparative scheme of technology for a Series S, I don't think is a lot of money, especially when I have no intention on ever buying a game specifically for the machine, because with
Okay.
Game Pass, you're going all digital anyway with Game Pass. It's not like you even have a question of if you want physical discs for your Game Pass. It's not fucking Netflix circa 2004
Mhm.
or GameFly, right? And I'm already the value I've already extracted out of Game Pass in now the solid week I've had to use it is well on its way to paying back the cost of the console itself. And
Sure.
when I get indie games, like when I get Cyber Shadow later this month for free through Game Pass, and when I try the Medium, we've just tacked on almost another $100 worth of value, right?
Mhm.
So I think that it's a special place to be. And when I look forward and I project into the future, that is the future of the future. An Everwild, a Halo Infinite, a Fable, and Avowed. That's a lot more compelling to me than another Horizon game, you know?
Yeah.
And it's a difference of perspectives. And like I said, none of that, what I'm saying is to disparage Sony's first party, but to point out the homogeny of Sony's first party, the variety of Xboxes, and the fact that that first party is backed up with services in an ecosystem that are so much more friendly and consumer focused than anyone else's. And like I said, when you have the games that Nintendo and Sony has, you can tell your consumers to go fuck themselves and they'll still come
Yeah.
because those
Which in
games
some
are there.
ways Nintendo has recently with this.
And they have. Nintendo's turned into a really terrible company in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
But Microsoft just has this fucking secret sauce and it's cooking up into a gumbo that's making me really happy. You know what I'm saying?
I'm glad you've got your secret gumbo making you happy, because that makes me happy too. I mean, I like the gaming industry being healthy. I like there being this competition, and I'm very happy for Microsoft at the moment. I think I just need to probably change my mindset a little bit. I'm nervous to get a Series S because I don't like the idea of that all digital future. I don't particularly like the idea of paying for that subscription service exclusively. Though it will save me money, and that's something I need to work on through my perspective. I think the outward issue of Microsoft, and the reason that I'm not getting it, is that they have a weird appearance, I would say, to gamers as the people who just make those other games, and hasn't quite settled in that yes, they do have the best deal for Game Pass. They do have the most powerful hardware. They are making the best consumer deals. Those things will set in over time, and I do think Xbox could become more of a powerhouse than even we're seeing right now. So I'm excited for that in the future. But I think that's about all we have time for in this episode. It's run long in the tooth, but I think we've gotten a really hearty amount of conversation out of all the stuff that you've been able to play last week. I was running
You
on
put
air
a
there.
lot of words in the end of that sentence, I
That
think.
was last week.
Oh, I'm fucking tired. I think I've become visibly tired to the audience as this episode has gone along, but it was worth it. It's almost probably gonna be fucking feature length by the time this is done. God damn
Yeah.
it. You don't deserve us. And that's where I want to end the video. Nothing else will be said. There's a certain unimpressive
games-
magnitude to that.
Yeah. And that's what my life is every day.
Yes, unimpressive magnitude.
I don't know if I like using that.
A man of unimpressive magnitude.
No, not when it comes to my fucking willy, you know what I'm saying?